My daughter-in-law told me her home wasn't a charity shelter for me and banished me to the garage like an old dog. My own son just stood there and let her. They thought they had silenced me, that I was just the invisible, unpaid nanny. They had no idea that my grandson, their own son, had just been given a school assignment to write a report on his family hero. And he didn't choose them. Before I begin my story, I just want to say thank you for listening to me pour my heart out. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. I love hearing from you all. It reminds me I'm not alone in this. Now, let me tell you what they did to me. My name is Patricia Mayhew, but everyone who has ever loved me has called me Patty. At 70 years old, my world had become the size of a converted two-car garage. It was a lovely garage as far as garages go. My son Terrence and his wife Chantel had insisted on finishing it with drywall and a small functional bathroom when I moved in. They called it the in-law suite, a term that sounded both modern and vaguely institutional, like a room in a facility you check into but never leave. It hadn't been supposed to be this way. 5 years ago, after my dear husband Robert passed, I had sold our large family home, the one with the sprawling garden I had tended for 40 years. I did it to help them. Terrence and Chantel were on the cusp of their dream life. A bigger house in a more prestigious neighborhood, a necessary step, Chantel had explained, for their social and professional advancement. My contribution, a significant six-figure sum from the sale of my own home, was the down payment that made their dream a reality. In return, they had built me this suite. I had traded my life's equity for a room next to the lawnmower. My days were governed by a new, unspoken contract. My rent was paid in the currency of my labor, a currency they devalued daily. I was the full-time unpaid nanny to my beloved 10-year-old grandson Leo. From the moment he woke until the moment he went to bed, I was his constant. I made his breakfast, packed his lunch with little notes tucked inside, walked him to the school bus, and was there when it dropped him off. I helped him with his homework, played catch with him in the backyard, and cooked his dinner every single night. This invisible, all-consuming work was what allowed Terrence to climb the corporate ladder at his marketing firm and Chantel to maintain her own demanding career as an event planner. They were a power couple, their success a glittering facade made possible by the silent, tireless engine in the garage. Me. And yet, in their eyes, I was a freeloader. My pension, which I quietly contributed to the household grocery bill every month, was never acknowledged. My presence was an inconvenience, my opinions outdated, my very existence a mild but constant source of irritation for my daughter-in-law. Chantel, a woman obsessed with her social image, resented my cluttering presence in her pristine, minimalist home. My crime was existing, leaving a teacup on her granite countertop, having a book that wasn't a trendy bestseller on my nightstand. She saw me not as the loving matriarch who enabled her entire lifestyle, but as a charity case occupying valuable square footage. "Patty," she'd say, her voice a little too bright, a little too sharp, "I noticed you left your gardening shoes by the back door again. Could we please keep all personal items confined to your own space? It helps with the visual flow of the house." My son Terrence, my boy, was a ghost in his own family's moral life. He was a good man, I knew deep down. But he was weak, utterly terrified of his wife's sharp tongue and her social ambition. He saw her casual cruelty towards me, I knew he did. I would see the flicker of shame in his eyes, the slight clenching of his jaw. But he would say nothing. His silence was his complicity, a quiet, daily betrayal that hurt more than any of Chantal's overt slights. I endured it all for Leo. He was the sun in my shrinking universe. He was a bright, sweet, and observant boy who adored his grandmother, and the feeling was mutual. In his hugs, in his easy laughter, I found my purpose. To leave would be to abandon him to the care of two ambitious, self-absorbed parents who were often too busy to even ask him about his day. And so I stayed, a willing prisoner in my garage suite, my payment the precious hours I got to spend with my grandson. But Chantal's resentment was a creeping vine, slowly strangling the small joys I had left. She began to see my close relationship with Leo not as a blessing, but as a threat to her own parental authority. She started to limit our time together, inventing errands for him to run, scheduling playdates I wasn't invited to. She was not just marginalizing me, she was trying to sever the one bond that gave my life meaning. The stage was being set for a confrontation, a final cruel act of banishment that would finally awaken the sleeping lioness of my own self-respect. The final, unforgivable humiliation came on a Saturday in early summer. It was the day of Chantal's annual garden party, a lavish affair that was the crown jewel of her social calendar. For weeks, the house had been in a state of frantic preparation, a whirlwind of caterers, florists, and rental companies, all orchestrated by a stressed and increasingly imperious Chantal. I, of course, was expected to make myself scarce, to remain invisible in my garage suite, a silent, unseen cog in the machinery of her perfect party. I didn't mind. I had no desire to mingle with her superficial friends, to endure their polite, pitying smiles. I was content to sit with my grandson Leo, who had decided the party was too boring, and had opted to spend the afternoon with me, building a magnificent Lego castle on the floor of my small room. The day was hot and my small window unit air conditioner was struggling to keep up. Around 3 o'clock I went into the main house kitchen, a place I now entered with the tentative caution of a trespasser, to get Leo and myself a glass of cold lemonade. The kitchen was a chaotic hive of activity, catering staff rushing back and forth with trays of elaborate hors d'oeuvres. Chantal was there in the center of it all, a vision in a white linen dress, directing the staff with sharp, imperious gestures. She saw me by the refrigerator, and her perfectly made-up face tightened into a mask of pure, unadulterated annoyance. She strode over to me, her movements sharp, angry. "What are you doing in here?" she hissed, her voice a low, vicious whisper, though several of the catering staff were close enough to hear every word. "I told you to stay out of the way." "I was just getting a glass of lemonade for myself and for Leo, Chantal," I replied calmly, my voice quiet. "It's very hot in the suite today." "I don't care," she snapped. "This is an important event for me, Patty. My home needs to look perfect. My guests are here. I can't have you wandering around, looking like that." She gestured vaguely at my simple, clean house dress, her lip curling with a faint sneer of disgust. Terence, my son, entered the kitchen then, a tray of empty champagne flutes in his hand. He saw the scene, the tension crackling in the air between his mother and his wife. He just stood there, his face pale, his eyes darting nervously between us, a silent, spineless witness to my degradation. And then Chantal delivered the final, crushing blow, the words that would become the catalyst for my quiet revolution. "This is an important event, Patty," she said, her voice now rising slightly, full of a cold, clear authority. "My home isn't a charity shelter for you to just wander around in. From now on, your space is the garage. That is where you will stay. Do not come into the main house unless you are specifically invited. Is that clear?" The words hung in the air, a public declaration of my banishment. The kitchen staff froze, their eyes wide, pretending not to listen but hearing everything. Terence just stared at the floor, his shame a palpable, useless thing. She had done it. In front of strangers, in front of my own son, she had formally, cruelly relegated me to the garage like an old, unwanted pet. She had stripped me of my last shred of dignity, my last claim to a place in this family, in this house that my own money had helped to buy. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. A strange, glacial calm settled over me. I looked at her, at my daughter-in-law, this cold, arrogant woman who held such contempt for me. And then I looked at my son, at the weak, cowardly man who was allowing this to happen. And I felt something inside me, a quiet, resilient part of my soul I had thought long dormant, begin to awaken. I slowly, deliberately filled a glass with lemonade. Then I turned and walked out of the kitchen, my back ramrod straight, my head held high. I did not give them the satisfaction of a single tear. I returned to my garage suite, to my grandson, who looked up at me from his Lego creation, his face full of a child's innocent concern. "Is Mommy mad, Grandma?" he asked. I sat down on the floor beside him, my heart a cold, hard stone in my chest. "No, my love," I said softly, my voice miraculously steady. "Your mother isn't mad. She has just made a very big mistake." And in that moment I knew with an unshakable certainty that this was not the end of my story. It was the beginning of hers. The story of her downfall. And I, the woman she had banished to the garage, was about to become its author. The days following the garden party were a study in cold, silent warfare. I adhered to Chantal's cruel edict with a meticulous, almost malicious, compliance. I did not set foot in the main house. I became a true resident of the garage, a queen in my small cinder block kingdom. My meals were simple, prepared on the small hot plate I had. My interactions with my son and daughter-in-law ceased entirely. They would leave Leo at my door in the morning on their way to work and pick him up in the evening, our exchanges brief, formal, and icy. My spirit, which Chantal had tried so hard to crush, was instead being forged into something new, something hard and unyielding. The heartbreak was still there, a constant dull ache, but it was now overlaid with a layer of pure, righteous fury. She had banished me. She had humiliated me. She had underestimated me. And that would be her undoing. The instrument of her downfall arrived, as such things often do, in the most unexpected of forms. It arrived in the hands of my 10-year-old grandson Leo. He came into my suite one evening after school, his face alight with an excitement that was a stark contrast to the usual somber mood of our shared exile. "Grandma, Grandma, look what I got," he exclaimed, waving a piece of paper in his hand. It was a flyer from his school, detailing the annual 4th grade Family Hero project. It was a major assignment, a rite of passage at his elementary school. Each student was to choose a family member who was their personal hero, research their life and accomplishments, and create a comprehensive presentation, a speech, a poster board, a slideshow, to be presented at a special Family Hero night in the school auditorium in 2 weeks. "Isn't it great?" he beamed. "I'm going to do my project on you." Just then Chantal appeared at the doorway, her purse and briefcase in hand. "Leo, time for dinner," she said, her voice sharp. She glanced at the flyer in his hand. "Oh, the Family Hero project. I already told you, Leo, you'll be doing your report on your father. His recent promotion at the marketing firm is a perfect example of success and perseverance. It will be very impressive." Leo's face fell. "But Mommy," he said, his voice small but defiant, "I don't want to do it on Daddy. I want to do it on Grandma Patty. She's a real hero." Chantal let out a short, dismissive laugh. "Don't be silly, Leo," she said, not even looking at me. "Your grandmother was a teacher. That's nice, but your father is a successful executive. It's a much better story. It's settled. Now come on, dinner's getting cold." She turned and left, expecting him to follow. But Leo stood his ground. He looked at his mother's retreating back, then at me, his young face set with a stubborn determination that reminded me so much of my late husband. "No," he said quietly but firmly. "My hero is Grandma Patty. And I'm going to do my report on her." In that moment, a flicker of something I had thought long extinguished, hope, ignited in my heart. It was a small, fragile flame, but it was there. This wasn't a plan for revenge, not yet. It was something far purer, far more powerful. It was a chance for my story, my real story, to be told. A chance for the truth to be heard, not in a courtroom, not in an angry confrontation, but from the innocent, honest lips of the person I loved most in the world. "All right, my sweet boy," I said, my voice thick with an emotion I couldn't quite name. "If you want me to be your hero, then I will be the best hero I can be. Let's get to work." And so began our secret project, our discreet rebellion, conducted in the confines of my garage suite. Chantal and Terence, so convinced of their own importance, so dismissive of my simple life, had no idea what we were doing. They assumed Leo was dutifully researching his father's corporate achievements. They had no idea he was, in fact, excavating the rich, untold history of his grandmother. This was my chance. Not to be petty, not to sling mud, but to arm my grandson with the undeniable, powerful truth of my life, of my contribution, of my value. A value his parents had so cruelly, so completely refused to see. The Family Hero Night was in 2 weeks. And the entire town, it seemed, was about to get a lesson in what a real hero and a real family looked like. Our 2 weeks of preparation for the Family Hero Project were a clandestine operation of love and historical reclamation. My small garage suite, the place of my banishment, transformed into a bustling command center, a treasure trove of my life's history. Leo, my 10-year-old grandson, became my devoted archivist, his initial excitement blossoming into a deep, serious sense of purpose as he began to understand the true scope of the story he was about to tell. We started with the basics. I pulled out my old, dusty photo albums and we spread them out on the floor, a mosaic of a life his parents had tried to convince him was insignificant. I showed him pictures of me as a young woman, full of hopes and dreams, graduating from teacher's college. I showed him a picture of his grandfather, my Robert, looking so handsome and proud in his army uniform before he was sent overseas. He was a hero too, Leo, I told him, my voice soft. A quiet one. He fought for this country. I showed him the medals his grandfather had been awarded, the ones that now sat hidden in a box, a part of the clutter Chantal so despised. Leo touched the cool medal with a reverent awe. Then I showed him the documents of my own career. My teaching certificate from 40 years ago. The letters of commendation from my old principals. The heartfelt crayon-scrawled thank you notes from decades of first-grade students whose lives I had touched. See, baby, I said. This was my work. Not as fancy as your daddy's, maybe. But it mattered. But our project was not just about the past. It was about the present. It was about quantifying the invisible labor that his parents had so completely devalued. And so, the retired teacher in me became a bookkeeper. All right, Mr. Mayhew, I said to Leo one afternoon, my voice taking on the professional tone of my old classroom days. Let's do some math. We sat down with a notepad and a calculator. I had him track my hours for a single week. The wake up at 6 to make his breakfast and pack his lunch. The school run. The hours of cleaning, of laundry, of grocery shopping. The after-school homework help. The dinner preparation. The evening routine. We tallied it all up. So, Grandma, he said, his eyes wide as he looked at the final number, you work more than 60 hours a week? Just here? At the house. That's right, my love, I said gently. But you don't get paid, he whispered, a dawning understanding of the injustice of it all on his young face. My payment, I told him, is you. He didn't fully understand, not yet. But he was beginning to. The final piece of our project, the one that would be the most damning, was the financial one. I was hesitant to expose him to the ugliness of his parents' finances, but revealing the truth was a necessary part of his hero's story. I showed him my old household budget book, the one I had kept for years. I showed him the entries, my careful tracking of my own pension, and how, month after month, a significant portion of it went directly to the household grocery bill, to his school supplies, to the family's car insurance. You see, Leo, I explained, chipping in isn't just about a job with a title. It's about contributing to the well-being of the family. With your time, with your love, and yes, sometimes with your money. Leo, my bright, observant boy, took all of this information and, with my help, began to craft his presentation. He wrote his essay not with anger, but with a simple, profound, and devastating love. He created a beautiful poster board, covered with photocopies of my old photos, my teaching awards, his grandfather's medals. And he made a simple, powerful chart, a bar graph that showed the 60-plus hours of Grandma Patty's work week. Chantal and Terence, of course, were completely oblivious. They saw us huddled over books and papers in my suite and assumed we were working on a report about Terence's successful career. How's the project coming, sport? Terence would ask with a self-satisfied smirk. Learning a lot about what it takes to be a winner? Yes, Daddy, Leo would reply, his expression carefully neutral. I'm learning so much. The night before the presentation we did one final rehearsal. Leo stood in the middle of my small room, his shoulders back, his voice clear and strong, and he told my story. He spoke of my years as a teacher, of his grandfather's quiet heroism, of my endless, unpaid labor, of my love for him. He ended his speech with a line that made tears spring to my eyes. My grandma is my hero, he said, his voice ringing with a pure, unshakable conviction, because she works harder than anyone I know, even when some people think she doesn't. I hugged him tight, my heart a mixture of a fierce, proud love and a deep, aching sadness. I had not intended for my grandson to become a soldier in my own quiet war. But his parents had left me no choice. They had tried to erase my story. And now my own grandchild, armed with the simple, undeniable truth, was about to read it aloud for the whole town to hear. The stage was set. And the hero of the evening would not be the one they expected. The school auditorium was packed. A buzzing, chaotic hive of parental pride and nervous energy. The air was thick with the scent of popcorn and cheap perfume. I found a seat in the back row, my hands folded calmly in my lap, my heart a steady, rhythmic drum. I was not here as a participant but as an observer. The story was no longer mine to tell. It was Leo's. I saw Chantal and Terence near the front, preening, accepting the congratulations of other parents on their son's wise choice of a hero. Yes, Terence is such an inspiration, I heard Chantal say to another mother, her voice full of a smug satisfaction. Leo has been so engaged learning all about his father's journey. It's been a wonderful bonding experience. I felt a small cold smile touch my lips. She had no idea. The evening began with a series of presentations. Young students, their voices trembling with a mixture of pride and stage fright, spoke of their heroes. A firefighter father. A doctor mother. A grandfather who had fought in a war. Each story was a small, beautiful testament to family love. And then it was Leo's turn. And now, the principal announced, we have Leo Mayhew, whose project is on his family hero. I saw Chantal and Terence puff up with pride, their smiles widening, ready to receive their public validation. Leo walked confidently to the stage, his poster board under his arm. He placed it on the easel, its contents still hidden from the audience. He took a deep breath, looked out at the crowd, his gaze sweeping past his parents and finding mine in the back row. He gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod. Good evening, he began, his 10-year-old voice surprisingly clear and strong, ringing through the quiet auditorium. My project is on my family hero. But my hero isn't my dad. A confused murmur rippled through the audience. I saw Chantal's smile falter, a look of bewildered annoyance crossing her face. Terence just stared, his mouth slightly agape. Leo continued, his voice gaining confidence. My father is a successful man and I am proud of him. But my hero, he said, his voice full of a profound, unwavering love, is my grandmother, Mrs. Patty Mayhew. He turned his poster board around to face the audience. It was a beautiful, chaotic, and utterly damning collage of my life. There was a picture of me on my wedding day, a photo of my husband in his army uniform, a copy of my old teaching certificate, and in the center a large, neatly drawn bar chart. My grandma was a first-grade teacher for 40 years, Leo said, pointing to the certificate. She taught hundreds of kids how to read. She helped them believe in themselves. That's a hero. Her husband, my grandpa Robert, was a soldier, he continued, his voice ringing with a pride that made my heart ache. He earned these medals for his bravery. He was a hero too. He pointed to the photocopied medals, each one a testament to an unsung heroism his own son had forgotten. Then he turned to the centerpiece of his presentation, the bar chart. But my grandma is my hero because of the work she does now, he said, his voice clear, matter-of-fact. The work nobody sees. He traced the tall red bar on the chart with his finger. This shows my grandma's work week. I helped her count the hours. She spends over 60 hours every week taking care of me, cooking our meals, cleaning our house, and doing our laundry. Also, my mommy and daddy can work at their important jobs. The auditorium was now utterly, completely silent. I could see the faces of the parents, of the teachers, turning to look at Chantal and Terence, their expressions shifting from polite interest to a stunned, dawning comprehension. Leo wasn't finished. He looked directly at the audience, his young face full of a simple, honest conviction. My grandma is my hero because she works harder than anyone I know, he concluded, his voice ringing with a pure, unshakable truth. Even when some people think she doesn't. She is the foundation of our whole family. And she never ever asks for anything in return. Thank you. He walked off the stage to a stunned silence, followed by a sudden, explosive and sustained round of applause. It was not the polite applause of a school event. It was a roar of approval, of understanding, of a community witnessing a profound, unexpected truth. I looked at Chantal and Terence. They were frozen in their front row seats, their faces ashen. They were trapped, illuminated in the harsh, unforgiving spotlight of their own son's love for me. Their carefully crafted image as a perfect, successful family had been shattered, not by an angry confrontation, not by a legal battle, but by the simple, devastating, and undeniable truth, spoken from the heart of a child. The applause in the auditorium that night was more than just a polite acknowledgement of a child's school project. It was a verdict. The parents, the teachers, the pillars of the community that Chantal and Terence had worked so hard to impress, had just heard the unvarnished truth, not from a bitter old woman but from an innocent, loving child. And in that moment the court of public opinion had delivered its judgment, swift and merciless. The immediate aftermath was a blur of averted gazes and whispered conversations. As the event concluded, I watched as Chantal and Terence, once the center of their glittering social circle, were suddenly completely isolated. People didn't just avoid them, They actively turned their backs, their polite smiles from earlier replaced with looks of cold, quiet contempt. The other parents, the mothers Chantal had tried so hard to emulate, now gathered around me, offering me their hands, their words of admiration, their stories of their own mothers and grandmothers. "Your grandson is a remarkable young man, Mrs. Mayhew," one of them said, her eyes full of a new, profound respect. "And it's clear where he gets it from." Chantal and Terence fled the auditorium, their faces a mixture of fury and profound public shame. Their carefully constructed image had not just been cracked, it had been irrevocably shattered. And the hammer that had struck the blow was their own son's heartfelt tribute. The fallout in the days that followed was a quiet, satisfying, and comprehensive dismantling of their social world. The story of Family Hero Night spread like wildfire through the manicured lawns and quiet cul-de-sacs of their affluent suburb. It was the talk of the school pickup line, the gossip at the country club, the subject of 100 hushed phone calls. Chantal, whose entire identity was built on her reputation as a perfect, high-achieving mother and hostess, was suddenly a social pariah. The invitations to the charity luncheons and dinner parties she so cherished ceased entirely. Her friends, the ones who had admired her success, now saw her as a fraud, a cruel, ungrateful daughter who had exploited her own loving mother. Terence faced his own quiet reckoning. At his marketing firm, where he had been so proud of his successful family man image, the story of his son publicly declaring his grandmother, not him as his hero, became a source of quiet, humiliating jokes. His authority, built on a foundation of bluster and image, was undermined. They had been shamed not by an angry confrontation, not by a lawsuit, but by the simple, undeniable power of the truth. They had devalued my love, my labor, my very existence. And now the community they so desperately wanted to belong to had, in turn, devalued them. My life, however, was transformed. The quiet, lonely woman who had been banished to the garage was now a celebrated figure in her community. I had found my voice again, not through my own words but through my grandson's. But my revenge, if you can call it that, was not just in their social downfall. It was in the quiet, profound shift within our own home. Chantal and Terence could no longer treat me with their casual contempt. They could no longer dismiss my contribution. As now the whole town knew. They knew who cooked the meals, who cared for the children, who was the true, unsung hero of their household. Their demeanor towards me changed. It was not warm, not loving, but it was respectful. A grudging, resentful respect, born not of a change of heart, but of a public defeat. It was the respect of a defeated army for its quiet, unassuming conqueror. And Leo, my brave, wonderful Leo, our bond, forged in the quiet rebellion of his school project, was now unbreakable. He was my shadow, my co-conspirator, my champion. He had given me back my voice, my dignity, my place in the world. My revenge was not a single fiery act. It was a quiet, ongoing reality. It was in the way Chantal now asked, not told me about dinner plans. It was in the way Terence now occasionally said thank you. It was in the way the neighbors now stopped to chat with me in the garden, their eyes full of a new warmth. And it was in the profound, beautiful peace I felt, knowing that my worth had finally been seen, had been acknowledged, had been celebrated. My grandson's love had been my weapon, his truth my vindication. He had not just told the story of his family hero, he had restored her. And that was a victory more satisfying, more complete, than any amount of money or power could ever be. My dignity was back where it belonged. Not in the garage, but in the heart of my family and in the respect of my community. And it was there to stay.